my Lanta.
Hi.
Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pastor Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella. And I'm angry at Pasta because he won't give me cupcakes he made full of marijuana oil.
Well, those cupcakes are made for a certain person.
He's had him
On
the fridge. He's had him on the fridge for days, and I can't access these cupcakes.
I know you can't. They're a French vanilla cupcake with a whipped strawberry cream cheese icing. They were real strawberries. They're beautiful. I just can. I'll tell you how good they taste. They taste good. But we have a big show to talk about today because
yes, we're not going to talk about Michael Cohen.
No, why not?
Because
is there not enough coverage on the liar confessing about another liar while a third liar and Debbie Wasserman Schultz is on the panel deciding whether who's lying or not? I mean, how much money is this shit costing America, fam? We don't even have clean water in Flint.
They're all falling for it. Everybody's falling for it. Everybody's posting about it. Like, why? Like, it's really not going to change anything.
It's a circus.
It's not going to do anything to get Donald Trump out of the office, and it's not going to do anything for our issues that we have. More things that are going to happen are with Medicare for All, which is that's an important thing. What's happening with Pakistan and India, what's happening with Iran, what's happening with Venezuela. These are bigger issues that are happening in the world, and we're literally ignoring them for a circus show.
We are.
So that's why we're not going to talk about it. But what we are going to talk about,
another circus show, fam, and the lead clown is almost breaking news. Uncle Joe is getting ready to get his fist up and throw his dukes in and announce that he might be running. In other words, fam, the establishment is throwing their last Hail Mary pass.
Their last grasp.
And they're summoning in Uncle Joe Biden to come. I mean, is this the best the Democrats have to offer, fam?
Apparently. I don't really think they have any other options. They have Kamala or Joe, or Hillary can run again.
Yes. I don't want Hillary to, you know. I mean, they are freaking out with Bernie Sanders raising over 10 million in his first week, and he was looking mighty presidential during that town hall debate with a loaded audience, loaded questions. He stood there under the fire, answered them, and he looked presidential as shit. We didn't like all his answers, but we liked a lot, fam. Okay? So Joe Biden is coming in. So before he announces, we want to give you here on the show the top 4 reasons on why you shouldn't vote for Joe Biden, okay?
And the mainstream media has been very clear on how much they just want him to run.
Yeah.
They'll put out polls where he's leading the poll or where he's second to Bernie Sanders, even though he hasn't even announced yet. They'll constantly put out articles like why Democrats want Joe, why Joe would be great, and so on and so forth. So, fam,
okay,
why wouldn't he?
Well, I mean, before we get into it, let's just say hot off the wire, too. We saw an article. Joe Biden's family is giving him his blessing. Well, we don't have that article, I guess. Okay, there it goes. There's a majority of Dems we talked about who wants Joe Biden to run. We talked about this. And then his family is also throwing it into the mix. But let's give you the top 5 reasons, okay? Number 1, fam. I believe he is Anita Hill. Anita Hill would be the first reason. A lot of people don't know this about Joe Biden, is that, fam, why don't you break it down? Because you put this in there, and I want you to explain this, because in the Me Too era, I don't think Joe Biden has a chance simply for what he did in the past as leader of the Senate when it comes to Anita Hill.
So a lot of this was brought back when Kavanaugh was being, accused by Christine Blasey Ford. And what happened back then was Clarence Thomas was accused by one of his one-time colleagues in a federal agency, Anita Hill, and he was accused of sexual harassment for a very long time. So Biden allowed the Judiciary Committee members to basically destroy her during the questioning and during the Thomas hearings, and he refused to call witnesses who were prepared to back her testimony up. And he says he has since then regretted it, but it's something that especially in the Me Too era, has come back to haunt him. And it's something that many of us as females refuse to overlook, especially because of how dismissive he was and how it's more important to do the right thing when it's less popular than to do good when it is popular.
And to just sit there and protect your other colleagues, do one for the boys. And, it's kind of creepy, some of the stuff. We have a little bit of a Twitter rants from Joe Biden as well. Take a look at these. Here we are. Fam, what do you got up there?
It's like a Twitter feed of basically just a bunch of
It's time to talk about former Vice President Joe Biden, the open sexual predator. Show the video, right? Are we showing this video? Look at the discomfort. What else do we got? We got some more tweets here?
Yeah. It's just really weird. You can just read them along the line.
Look at that. Look at how creepy that is. His wife Jill over there is a professor, teaches college. What else we got on the docket, fam?
Johnny, can you just go through some of these tweets and see? It's a Twitter feed just with all of the things he has done.
It's the same video.
It shouldn't be. I think so. Okay.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's another video, I think, right over here that has a basically just shows Joe in weird positions, touching kids, being extremely friendly with with young people. And that's something that, I mean, it's been going around with a lot of the kind of Pizzagate-ish stuff, but I mean, I'm hesitant to accuse him of being a pedophile, but it is really weird that there's a series of Twitter threads that have him like just word by word, like, okay, this is one instance where he was weird with a child. This is another instance where he was weird with a child.
I mean, the main thing is that, too, we talk about this topic. It's right here. It's the Anita Hill stuff, too. Withholding that information, not letting the witnesses go up and testify, letting her just get savage. And then we have this other kind of creepy kind of attitude and creepy type of behavior that's caught on film all the time. It's just not a good image. And I think it's gonna make him ineffective to try to even beat Donald Trump, first of all.
Yeah.
So let's go over number 3, the crime bill. The crime bill is a big one, fam, because he wrote the original 94 crime bill and defended it ever since. Go ahead, fam.
So this is another Clinton era policy where it was under the 2016 Democratic presidential nominee under Hillary Clinton, the 1994 crime bill, which, among other things, allocated $10 billion for the construction of new prisons and incentivized states to pass truth and sentencing laws, which were like discretion away for judges to be requiring violent offenders to serve a minimum of 85% of their prison terms. Hillary Clinton's infamous and racially charged justification for the law for the gang of kids called super predators headed was and to be brought to heel. All of that stuff became a hurdle in her campaign in 2016 and arguably helped her lose the general. And Biden was the one who wrote this original bill. Yeah. And she tried to walk back her support, but Biden has never actually said anything about it, has never actually recanted his support. So it's still one of those things that he's attributed.
Let's talk about this real quick because, as progressives, we don't want people taking money, right? We don't want, we look at the corporate donations and stuff. We also pay very close attention to the military-industrial complex. Who's giving the military-industrial complex money? We don't want to deal with it. Who's getting money and who's funding Big Pharma? We don't want to deal with it. But another one that we really hate, fam, is we want the criminal justice department reformed. This whole system, we want it reformed. And we don't want people taking money from the prison industrial complex. This crime bill was $10 billion allotted to build new prisons. It was a gift, hand-wrapped from Joe Biden to the prison industrial complex. He's too tainted. It's too dirty. This crime bill will never allow him to beat Donald Trump.
He wrote it. He wrote it.
And he's always supported it, fam, too.
Yeah.
He said he hasn't even walked back away from it.
And he has, if you look at his policies in general, you'll see that he's pretty much like a Republican in a lot of his stances when it comes to criminal justice, when it comes to war. So that's another thing, fam. The next one.
Well, number 2, we're going 3. 4 was Anita Hill, okay, the sexual predator behavior. 2 was the crime bill and the prison industrial complex. And that was 3. Number 2 is his NATO-loving war hawk mentality. We have a little clip over here. I believe in Iraq. Or is that
it's just we have an article.
About what goes about the whole Iraq situation.
He specifically stated that President Bush did not lash out precipitously at the Iraq war on 9/11. He did not snub the UN or our allies. He did not dismiss new inspection regimes. He did not ignore Congress. And this is what Biden said in a 2002 floor speech given during the debate over legislation authorizing the war in Iraq. He supported the war in Iraq fully, and he also didn't hold George Bush accountable, and also anybody else that was so militant in our attack in Iraq.
Yeah, I mean, he is definitely a war hawk. I mean, I don't want to listen. I refrain from putting up the video of him crying at McCain's funeral because I didn't want to go below the belt and stuff. But this was like, I mean, I'm sorry, no tears should be shed for a war hawk and John McCain, and also Joe Biden. And this guy, to me, fam, is like the George Bush of the Democrats. Oh, he's a cool guy. He's a nice guy. I would want to go have a beer with him.
Joe.
But what about his attitude towards Russia? I got a little clip from Rupley over here that we grabbed. And somebody needs to give the message to Joe and say, hey, Joe, World War II is over. You mean I have the whole clip, 47 seconds, right under the Russia stuff. Yes. Take a look. The Rupley video.
So I'm here to say on behalf of the President what I hope you already know.
The volume's working.
Count on us. Period. We do what we say, and we mean what we say. Today, aggression in Crimea, less than 250 miles from Romanian territory, from NATO's borders, reminds us why we need NATO and why Romania belongs to NATO. What Russia has done violates not just Ukraine's sovereignty, but a fundamental principle we fought for in the 20th century and thought we had clearly established. Europe's borders should never again be changed at the point of a gun.
Okay. Type of rhetoric and mentality in the talks, which, when it was its aggression towards Russia. It's about putting soldiers and missiles on their border, which violates, everything that happened since the Cuban Missile Crisis. It violates any NATO treaty. And Joe has been a big proponent of that. I've seen him on Vice talking about it's okay for these countries to have missiles on the border. And if Joe Biden were to get elected, Cold War struck right back up. Okay, you know what I'm saying? And I don't know what his problem is. Maybe he should listen to his former boss, because even his former boss talked about how Russia is perceived. Take a little look at a clip of his old boss, Barack Hussein Obama. Barack Hussein Biden. Take a look.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that Al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not Al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back, because the Cold War has been over for 20 years.
There it goes.
But Governor,
you said it right there. They stop it right there. The Cold War has been over for 20 years, but Joe still has this heated rhetoric about advancing NATO troops and NATO weaponry.
That's interesting, coming from Obama too.
Yeah.
Like what the drone king.
Yeah,
it's really interesting actually coming from him.
Well, it's all lip service. That's all the Democrats do, and Joe is just part of that whole establishment lip service. That's just going to give you a bunch of malarkey. Do we have any malarkey out there? It's going to give you a bunch of malarkey, and
With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey.
Somebody said that to Paul. It's a bunch of malarkey, and and Joe Biden is the king of malarkey. And fam, the number one reason why we should talk about it, because we talk about the oligarchs. We talk about the number one pressing issue is income inequality. Well, what did Uncle Joe do?
What did he do?
Number one, the reason, right in front of you. Read it.
Well, he deregulated Wall Street.
Yes.
100%. And he absolutely stood with the bailouts that were given to Wall Street, to the banks, by the Clintons. And so let's start with his top campaign donor for over 2 decades was the financial services company MBNA. And Biden was also a reliable yes vote for President Bill Clinton's bank deregulation. He voted for the Regal-Neal Interstate Banking and Branching Efficiency Act of 94, excuse me, and then that enabled commercial banks to do business across state lines. And the Graham-Leach Bliley Act of 1999 overturned Glass-Steagall, which separated commercial investment banks. So according to the Senate report on this subprime mortgage crisis, Wall Street and the financial crisis, the anatomy of a financial collapse, the effect of these two laws was to centralize and the decentralized U.S. banking system, consolidating power and risk into a few institutions now referred to as too big to fail. So essentially, he led this entire deregulation of these banks and these corporations, which are now too big to fail.
It's a Clintonite soldier of the deregulation leading from the Glass-Steagall, which you were talking about. And it was so important because people don't understand that Glass-Steagall was an FDR bank regulations that saved us from the thing that got us in the problem in the first place before the Great Depression. And that was to not allow banks to use investment banking and private personal banking in the same pot. In other words, they couldn't take your money before and put it at risk. When Glass-Steagall was deregulated and Joe Biden was at the head of it with the Clintons, now the banks were able to take your personal money and risk it and put it at play. They might as well give them that money to take it to the fucking racetrack because it all went to hell.
Though Biden says he regretted this.
Worst vote ever.
Just like Hillary Clinton, though, he did back this. And now we're seeing a lot of similarities between Biden and Hillary Clinton, which is a big red flag, by the way. He also weakened the bankruptcy. This also weakened the bankruptcy protections for consumers. And the New York Times noted in August of 2008, Biden was one of the earliest supporters of the bill, voting for it 4 times until it passed. He was one of 5 Democrats in March of 2005 who voted against a proposal to require credit card companies to provide more effective warnings to consumers about the consequences of paying only the minimum amount due each month. And I'm very well aware of all of that, especially that was all prior to 2008. And he also helped defeat amendments aimed at strengthening protections for people who were forced into bankruptcy, who have large medical debts or are military. And so he was one of 4 Democrats who sided with Republicans to defeat an effort to shift responsibility from the debtors to the predatory lenders who helped them push into bankruptcy, push them into bankruptcy.
And let me just reiterate the heart of that comment too as well. And when you think about it, this guy was one of 4 Democrats that went over to the other side to vote with the Republicans to screw you over, the taxpayer, the investor, anything. You got screwed with this signing right over here. And then he didn't stop there, fam, because in '96, talk about what he did with welfare.
Biden voted yes on a controversial bill referred to as the welfare reform, which, among other things, added work requirements and a 5-year lifetime limit on the program TANF, Temporary Assistance to Needy Families. So it's basically, they sold it as a curb abuse of welfare, the whole like, oh yeah, people on welfare abuse the system. And the measures had the effect of forcing people off the rolls while doing little to address their needs. So while the administration touted the decline in the number of families on welfare, the number in extreme poverty, defined as households in which individuals live on $2 in cash per day, rose and has been on the rise ever since.
Can I tell you something too? In Florida, a lot of local actual politicians and Congress people within Florida, their local politicians would tout this bill and talk about the way the Clintons and the Bidens helped with the welfare situation. And they actually enacted laws that would say to get welfare, you'd have to go take a drug test. You know what I'm saying? They tried to float this whole thing. And these were the avenues. These were the steps. This was the beginning of pulling down those barriers. So Joe was part of that. And fam?
Yeah, and people talk about Republicans always, talking about welfare and et cetera. Biden was pretty much in policy a Republican, and in front of you he might have
Wow.
said different things, but when it comes to what he's doing behind closed doors, what he's doing in policy, that's what we
He's
need
a regular
to be
guy,
aware
fam.
of.
We can go have a beer with him, though. What are you talking about? Because he's a Republican.
He's
a nice guy. He's Uncle Joe.
He's an old white guy. And you know why I'm saying that? Because that's the number one criticism that they speak about against Bernie
These
Sanders.
establishment people, these progressives, right?
Literally,
Ooh.
against Bernie Sanders. Oh, we don't need another old white guy. Yet the
R.L. Miller
establishment,
will not be voting for Joe Biden, that's for sure. So
the establishment is trying to push Joe Biden. And he's an old white guy. Why? Oh, well, he's a Democrat. That's the rebuttal.
Oh, he's a Democrat. No, he's
Bernie
a regular
Sanders
guy.
isn't a real Democrat.
I want to go have a beer with Joe Biden, fam. But there's more because, what about all that money wasted on the war on drugs, fam?
Yes, he supports the war on drugs. He also voted and is likely laid the groundwork for the U.S. Patriot Act.
Part of that.
So the U.S. Patriot Act, we have a little snippet here. So it says the next year, months before the Oklahoma City bombing took place, Biden introduced another bill called the Omnibus Counterterrorism Act of 1995. It previewed the 2001 Patriot Act by allowing secret evidence to be used in prosecutions, expanding the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and wiretap laws, creating a new federal crime of terrorism that could be invoked based on political beliefs, permitting the U.S. military to be used in civilian law enforcement, and allowing permanent detection for non-U.S. citizens without judicial review. The Center for National Security Studies said the bill would erode constitutional and statutory due process protections and would authorize the Justice Department to pick and choose crimes to investigate and prosecute based on political beliefs and associations. So basically, this was a precursor to the Patriot Act, which allowed something like the Patriot Act to exist, which literally just allowed them to basically come and hack anything of yours, prosecute
Deep
you
state friendly,
regardless
fam.
of any kind of rights, without any kind of rights, this is a violation of our Constitution, and they're allowed to do it because it passes as a Patriot Act.
And like you said, fam, he might be a Democrat registered, but he is definitely he votes like a Republican. And even furthermore, in 2006, the border fence. So did Clinton, you know what I'm saying? He voted for the border fence, the Secure Fence Act of 2006, authorizing around 700 miles of fencing along the U.S. border with Mexico. But yet you can see Uncle Joe on TV cursing and yelling about Donald Trump. Meanwhile, he's been there all along, fam. He's been for a while.
And the reason we're talking about this is because there's one thing you guys see on CNN, and they're never going to talk about this. They will never talk about this.
Never. Never.
They're not going to talk about it. They'll put it in articles and stuff. But so this is not breaking news, but let's not forget that Uncle Joe is also a condescending prick.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. Remember when he said this to millennials?
I'll never forget.
And we were told, drop out, go out to Haight-Ashbury, get engaged. Shortly after I graduated in 68, Kent State, 17 kids shot dead. And so the younger generation now tells me how tough things are. Give me a break. No. I have no empathy for it. Give me a break.
It's the no empathy part. Excuse me. I was gonna say it's not the no empathy. Yeah, it's the no empathy part that really stuck the dagger in there. The give me the break is like whatever. It sucks, but I have no empathy. Yeah. You want to be the president and you have no empathy for all these people living on the street. You want to be the president and you have no empathy for people dying in these false wars that you helped aid and help get started. You have no empathy for people and their privacy getting stripped because you were one of the founders of the Patriot Act. You have no empathy for people like Anita Hill, who you wouldn't even let witnesses come up to testify in her behalf to protect her while your friends and your buddies were treating her like a piece of meat. They threw her in like a lion in a cage, and Anita Hill got destroyed, her life ruined.
Not to mention she was an African-American woman, and not to mention the fact that he has no empathy apparently to the economic crisis that people my age are experiencing. Millennials have known since we were children. The war in Iraq, which defined our existence, and then the Wall Street bailouts from 2008 as we were graduating high school. All of this happening literally to tell me that as a would-be voter, you are shooting yourself in the head because I am not going to vote for you when you have zero empathy and you're telling me you don't care about the issues I have to go through. You're telling me straight to my face that You just don't care.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal to you. Of course, it's not a big deal to you
Yeah.
because it doesn't apply.
It
to
never
you.
affected you, your rich ass and
But
your
look,
money and your
Bernie
healthcare.
Sanders.
Yeah.
It might not affect him to that degree,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. He's one of those people that looks into it. And our guy here, Johnny
We have,
Tsunami.
as if it wasn't enough, but Johnny Tsunami, right? More stuff,
Yeah.
Johnny, because we didn't point out he doesn't talk to lobbyists, does he, Johnny Tsunami?
No, my camera's not working for some reason, but
Okay,
We
we
have
can hear you
audio.
though, right?
yes. So, I was looking at pictures for Joe Biden, and I was wondering, I wonder if there's some pictures of Joe Biden at AIPAC.
Oh no, lobbyist.
And I was like, yeah, there is.
Oh, and once again, why do we have to lose a president who's already shilling and doing the work of Israel and replace him with just a Democrat that is shilling
But why
and
does it
doing
matter,
the work
Johnny?
of Israel?
It matters because I was like, I was thinking, oh, what, doesn't everybody speak at AIPAC? Or, like, does everybody speak there? Obama's been there, Bush has been there, a bunch of people have been
Trump?
there. So it got me wondering if there's a picture of Bernie Sanders at AIPAC. And newsflash, there is not, if you look it up.
We talk Bernie Sanders picture at AIPAC, not available.
And he's Jewish.
yeah.
And actually, the only article that came up when searching, it says he delivered a killer AIPAC speech in Utah.
Yeah.
So,
And it was a killer speech.
because he declined to speak at the country's largest pro-Israel gathering on Washington on Monday.
Oh.
Instead, the Democratic presidential candidate, who is the only Jew in the race, gave a speech detailing his belief in a two-state solution. So, not only will he not speak there, and,
yeah.
everyone else speaks there.
But Joe Biden, he goes a shilling.
And even,
Great stuff, Johnny.
And that's even like, and Bernie still
Great
gets
stuff.
criticized for the two-state solution thing, right? Because there is a lot of controversy with what that means and stuff like that. But the fact that he's never spoken in an AIPAC event, unless it's like to tear it down, and he's Jewish, says a lot about where he's going to stand. He's going to stand also with the Palestinian people, and I do think it's one issue where he can develop more. But I also think that. It's hard. He is of Jewish descent, so I think it's one of those things he's kind of like treading along carefully.
So, fam, for Joe Biden being president,
With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey.
what is that? It's a bunch of
With all due
malarkey.
respect, that's a bunch of malarkey.
It is a bunch of malarkey. So we'll just do it again with Anita Hill, sexual predator stuff. We have, what was number 3?
The Wall Street deregulation, the crime bill,
The crime bill.
I mean, the border fencing, the voting with Republicans in
The
regards
war
to welfare,
hawk.
the war hog. I mean,
The fence.
list goes on. We don't even need to mention how creepy he is, but that all of that in itself should make Democrats think twice. And by the way, I hope he runs, because you know what? It's just going to divide
More of the
It's gonna
centrist
divide
vote.
more of the centrist vote. Like, let him run. Let him run. And let it happen. But fam, I do want to talk about something we talked about yesterday.
Because I think this topic is as bad as confusing as can be in fam. And I know you want to get this out there.
Reparations, fam.
Reparations.
I want to talk about reparations because people are still not getting it. They're still not getting how important this issue is for many reasons. This issue is important because, unpopular opinion, Bernie Sanders did the right thing at the town hall and said the right things on reparations.
I thought he did.
So we have this Intercept article right here. Basically, the Intercept article talks about how Bernie Sanders was intelligent in asking these questions, like what does this reparation mean? What does it signify? It's an empty promise by Warren and Kamala Harris, because they have no plan and no kind of specific nature into this. And actually, they're not even supporting the actual reparations. They're actually more so talking about what he said, just making sure that people who have suffered under slavery and who have suffered under our imperialism, basically, which is a lot of people, let's be honest, should deserve some sort of compensation. But they haven't specified how they would do that. Like we said yesterday, Marianne Williamson has been more specific,
Way
targeting
more
the
specific.
1% on that. That's something I could specifically get behind. But let me talk about what Bernie Sanders said. Bernie Sanders asked a crucial question, and he said, what does that mean? What do they mean? I don't think anyone's been very clear. And he's right. Up until now, no one's bothered to define reparations in the context of the 2020 vetting. And the discourse has suffered from it. Like Harris and Booker before them, Warren and Castro's support for reparations amounts to support on principle, but not policy. And that's an important point.
Yeah.
It's all on principle, but not
on policy.
They know that. They know there's no way this is ever going to go through. They know this is no way this is ever going to pass, when the majority of Americans are scared of hearing that word because they don't know what it means, so they make their own assumptions.
Yeah. Can we talk about that 1 second?
Yeah.
Because like when you say they know it's not going to pass, these empty promises, it was almost the same thing as when Kamala Harris finally came out for Medicare for All. It was an empty promise because now we had a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and it's never going to pass. It's almost like when Schumer, day one, the first thing he starts working about, you know, when Trump takes office, is legalizing marijuana because he knew he had Jeff Sessions in there. And it was an empty promise, you know, a day late and $1 short. So, fam, they're doing the same thing here right now, signaling and whistling to people, oh, we're for reparations, we're for reparations. All about rhetoric, all about principle, nothing about policy.
And this doesn't mean that the reason I'm criticizing it means that I don't support reparations. I am just angry at the fact that people are falling for something that is being manipulated through emotions and it's being pawned off for votes. Something that is a false promise that people aren't going to get. Black families, for instance, have had a much steeper hill to climb. We need systematic structure changes to address that, Warren has said, but neither actually support it. Harris's answer after a lengthy preamble was, no, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that only benefits Black people. She literally said that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do something that only benefits Black people. That is what Harris said. Yet she's saying she supports reparations. So to her, reparations means something entirely different. And I'm just done with people online being like, no, but Harris is more to the left of Bernie and she's more progressive because she's supporting reparations. And so it's like, no, they're not. She's literally telling you that she's not. What she is doing, though, and she's contradicting herself because I guess she doesn't even get it herself, is it's pandering for votes. And
Warren has really stepped in some dog duty when it comes to a lot of these things, and a lot of things are coming to fruition. Her voting, her identity politics, her going out and doing the whole Native American test was just a sham. I mean, it made her look so bad, and now they're going to start digging into her voting record. And on that stage right now, she's in third place for me. I like her a lot better than Kamala. I like her a lot better than Booker. But shit like this is going to come out. And when you're just throwing out these words, reparations, and you're not willing to put the policy back behind it, it's just an empty promise, fam.
I mean, to me, she's like in fifth place, honestly, because to me, it's like Bernie, Tulsi, Andrew Yang, Marianne Williamson, and then Warren.
Yeah.
That's just my.
Well, I don't know
based
about
on progressive
Yang
issues, but Yang is really great. He was actually, I think he was on a couple of progressive talk shows, and
he's a great guy.
He's really.
Don't
awesome.
you think though, fam, too, when it comes to these reparations, even if we were going to talk seriously about them, isn't it putting the cart before the horse? I mean, not to say that it's not important, but.
It's good to have the discussion, but you need to have the discussion before you say you're supporting something you haven't even discussed.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And without even, detailing what you want as far as reparations, aren't there a lot of events a lot of things we have to take care of taking care of people as a society as a whole, and then kind of look into these things once we get there? I mean if we did reparations today, how is that going to help everybody in the economy?
Which is, I get your opinion, and I kind of agree and I kind of disagree, but here's the thing. The majority of America, that's exactly how they feel. They feel like we are all suffering. And that's why, even if they had laid out a specific plan, pushing something like that in the general is going to make you lose to Donald Trump.
It is.
And it's almost like it's a plot to make Bernie, to push Bernie to say yes on something that isn't even specific and isn't even targeting the right people.
Yeah.
And then that way, of course, he pushes it, and then he'll win the primary, but he'll lose the general.
Yeah.
And and if he says no, then it's like, oh, well, then he's not for reparations, and he's a racist sexist Bernie bro. And so then, like, it's a catch-22. So what Bernie is doing is actually the right thing because he's asking the right questions. There are legitimate but not insurmountable logistical concerns for administering a race-specific plan. How do you account for people who are not only partially descended from American slaves? What about those who can't prove their lineage? What about families who immigrated early enough to experience Jim Crow, but after slavery?
Yeah.
Is the most politically viable way to deliver material benefits to Black Americans via intersectionally designed universal programs? But by asking Blitzer to define what these reparations actually mean, Sanders shifted the conversation from speculative rhetoric to practical policy, and in doing so made it more likely that the goals of reparations will be pursued in good faith in the future, and he forced everyone to show their hand.
Fam, I mean, this is some great stuff. I'm glad we did the show because at first I was like, we're going to talk about reparations again. This is going to kind of go in whatever direction, but this is some great stuff. But, you know, I asked you the other day, it's like, and you said over here in your last statement too as well, when you do it for one specific race, then how do we kind of do it? I mean, wouldn't people like the Native Americans say they deserve reparations? Wouldn't people like the Chinese who built the railroads and died doing so? What about all the, you know, New York was built by the Irish and the Italians, the Saccos and the Vanzettis that died building all these things? I mean, how can we section off who gets what reparations and how do we do that? That's why I think it's just such an empty promise to talk about all these things.
Well, I think ultimately, though, the act of slavery, the act of being brought from your homeland, the act of being chained and forced against your will is something that I think Americans do need to repair, because we are unique, though, in that way, because we have that in most other countries in the world don't have that near history. I mean, it's only been a few years since the Jim Crow laws were enacted, but I believe we need to be specific in how we're going to do that, and we need to not scare people away and thinking that, you know, blaming them for everything, thinking that this is going to be just this one. You know, people are afraid of things that a lot of people in rural America, they're afraid of just things that push people of color. And, you know, I mean, it's something that has to be done. People of color have been repressed and subjugated and oppressed for a really long time. However, when you talk about reparations, you have to define it. Otherwise, people are going to be scared and they're going to make their own assumptions, their own conclusions, and it's not going to be based on actual facts. So the preliminary questions that journalists should ask, according to this article, instead of saying,
these are great.
Instead of do you support reparations, are will you commit to meaningfully researching and developing a plan for reparations, which I think many of us would be more likely to say yes.
Fam.
And if and when you develop a policy, will you commit to implementing it? And 100%, like, I mean, I personally am for reparations. I feel like it's not fair to give people like this little candy and like make them follow along for a vote. And I think that's actually wrong. And in the article, she also says, I suspect most candidates would have a much easier time answering yes to this formulation, and rightly so. At this point, every candidate who has opined has done a solid job of articulating the why of reparations, slavery, Jim Crow disparities. Now, the question worth asking is how.
You know, I got to tell you too, fam. I mean, did you come up with those questions or what they?
No, this is from the article.
The article is, I mean, that's great.
But this is what we were talking about yesterday, and what I've been talking about with some of my comrades who understand that what they're doing, what the establishment is doing, is trying to get Bernie Sanders in the corner so he loses either way, and we can't fall
That's what
into
that whole town hall was. It was a straight up hit job.
Absolutely.
On every angle you can attack Bernie Sanders, and once again, the difference between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, if you do that to Donald Trump, he would just insult and smear and belittle you right there. Bernie Sanders takes a deep breath. If he disagrees with something, he says he disagrees, but then he explains his position and his point, and it's so presidential. Fam, go ahead.
And just as long as the question of reparations is vague, it's more likely to be controversial. And undefined reparations can take a form of the public's worst fears. This is what I was talking about. And a free check to the underserving Black masses, which who knows might be the best option, versus tuition or housing grants that mimic those New Deal programs from which Blacks were historically excluded, which is true. Blacks were historically excluded from these programs.
They were.
So both Black and white legislators have shied away from the question of reparations, including Barack Obama, treating it as a political hot potato, hiding behind the idea that reparations are just too complicated to administer. Nailing down an actual plan destroys that rationale. Vagueness is a gift to the non-committal. So when you are vague, that means you're not committed, right? This goes for anything, whether you're in a relationship or whatever it is. If someone's like, if you don't talk about it, there's a non-committal. If you are defined and specific in whatever it is, then you know that you're solid and you have a plan and you know where you're going. And by being vague on this, they're basically doing the whole, well, we're for affordable health care, when you know it's not Medicare for all. And that's one thing that I can't stand.
Yeah.
So, I also wanted to talk about, in relations to reparations, there's a part 2 on this. The hypocrisy of crucifying Bernie. A lot of people on the left have been crucifying Bernie for reparations, saying, come on, white people, like, he was wishy-washy.
Yeah.
He should have said the word reparations, but they haven't said a word about his stance on Venezuela. Okay, to me, that's hypocritical, because the left on one hand, centrists are cool with more war, but on another, they're clutching their pearls over an empty promise, an empty word. And so Bernie was criticized by his supporters for his stance on Venezuela, rightfully so. But some more centrist supporters got angry, saying, how dare you criticize Bernie? He's right on the issues. And he's a non-interventionist candidate. He doesn't really want us to go into Venezuela. However, he's made assumptions on the Maduro election and saying that it was undemocratic, and kind of been on the fence as far as the humanitarian aid, which we know is a Trojan horse.
It is. And I think you describe it best when you say it's a Trojan horse. I mean, it's ridiculous. The guy who was put in charge of making sure the humanitarian aid gets into Venezuela was the same guy who was put in charge in the 80s, who smuggled weapons in used to kill people through humanitarian aid in the 1980s, who was also found convicted of lying to Congress twice.
We're putting a bank robber
it's ridiculous.
in charge
And
of
the
a bank.
fact is, there is some form of manufacturing consent when you don't discuss about how Venezuela ended up here.
Exactly.
Like I said, fam, I want to talk about sanctions today. I want to talk about how sanctions are a pinpoint target to the poor, and how the poor suffer. And this war was waged 20 years ago, and the Obama administration had a big hand to play. These sanctions that took place that crippled Venezuela from the inside, manufacturing consent for the people to say, I want to turn over this government because things are so bad. And it was all done through sanctions and banking and manipulating. So today they can lead up to this situation where Donald Trump can say, look, it's a failed socialist state. We got to go in there and save the people. But all along, it's all about going in there and getting the oil.
Exactly. And so these very same people who have gone crazy on him over reparations, don't care about the immorality and the death of our imperialist regime change wars. So it's kind of hypocritical to me. Like, if you're going to care about the reparations to our people in the United States, why do you not care about any sort of reparations we must do to people in other countries we've invaded?
South and Central America.
And South Central America, the Middle East, Africa. I mean, we've been everywhere. What about the reparations
there? I mean, yeah.
There's no reparations there. Why? Because they're not from our country. I guess death and morality have American borders, and that's not okay. And I want to put a quote of Abby being really critical of Bernie when he says the people of Venezuela are enduring a serious humanitarian crisis. The Maduro government must put the needs of its people first, allow humanitarian aid into the country, and refrain from violence against protesters. And Abby said, you know better than to endorse a stunt led by war criminals who have snuck weapons in aid shipments in the past. Yep. This stance will not make Democrats like you more and will only lose you support from socialists, which she's entirely right. And he kind of went back on the town hall and kind of went back on and said, okay, I'm not for going into Venezuela, and that's why I still stand by him. And I believe overall he's just saying that because of the nature of the beast, the military-industrial complex. But he's also being criticized with one of his biggest supporters, Roger Waters, who I'm a fan of. Bernie, are you fucking kidding me? If you buy the Trump, Bolton, Abrams, Rubio line, humanitarian intervention, and collude in the destruction of Venezuela, you cannot be a credible candidate for president of the United States. Or maybe you can. Maybe you're the perfect stooge for the 1%. I mean, he's really mad. Yeah. And I think a lot of people feel this way because they understand that it's code humanitarian aid. Where is the humanitarian aid for our people? right? It goes back to the same thing. Why aren't we helping our own people, yet we're trying to go into Venezuela for humanitarian aid? Let's just be honest. We're trying to go in there to control, to have oil, for power.
The biggest oil
everything
reserves
else.
in the world and stuff, and it's terrible. And
Yeah.
Roger Waters does some great work. You can find him on the Real News Network, and he talks about these sanctions because these sanctions are pinpointed, and everything is just that was set in motion is to lead up today. And that's what they're trying to do with this humanitarian aid. They're trying to spark a controversy. We know who the violence was with. They were pro Juan Guaido supporters who lit that truck on fire.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? They're trying to spark something so they can go in there, because the next thing is boots on the ground coming in, and now we've sparked another war and another regime change, and the oligarchs get their way. And Bernie has been getting better on this issue, but he has to continue to get even more better. And we're going to talk about these sanctions in the next couple of days. I'm going to pinpoint some of these sanctions, fam, to show you what the American elites did to really, because sanctions hurt poor people, and what they did to raise doubt within their government, to put a stranglehold on their government, to make people starve, to not get the proper medication. And we're going to point it out, and Bernie needs to get better on this subject. And this is also why, fam, we need Tulsi on that debate stage.
Exactly. And
why.
that's why we need Tulsi, because she will put all of that stuff out there. And another thing that's happening in the United States that would require some sort of reparations are the people that are coming in from the caravans where thousands of migrant children have been sexually abused while being held up. And it's one
For
of those
years
things.
now.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, well, you know, that's what I want to talk about, reparations, because what about reparations to the countries we've invaded?
Yeah.
And these people and the lives we've destroyed from our regime change wars, from our coups that we've created in Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua. And so that we need to give those people reparations too, because now they're coming in here and we can't even let them in because now Trump's trying to build a wall. I mean, it's all connected, and every single time, like,
I gotta
we have
say
to
something.
realize how
Yes.
everything is connected.
Yeah, fam, I just want to say, because you gave me an idea, if we stop and talk about the sanctions of today, we don't have to talk about the reparations for these people of tomorrow. And it's very hypocritical to say, I'm going to stop, I want reparations, but yet sanctions are in front of your eyes, which are killing and crippling people right now, and you're not going to speak against them. Sorry about that, fam.
No, that was a great point. I honestly think
you bring
like,
out the best in me,
fam.
I know I'm being vague and general and stuff, but I love you, fam.
He's the
and I love you,
emotional one, you
Tsunami.
guys.
We understand who the brains is on the show and who the beauty is. Go ahead, fam. Next point.
The emotional beauty.
Yes.
So Beth, here for it, who's also my friend on Facebook.
Love Beth.
She's awesome. She put this awesome Kamala tweet. She said, in Kamala Harris's CNN town hall, she was not asked about her failure to prosecute Steve Mnuchin, sexual harassment in her own campaign, by the way, $400,000 paid under the table. Back in December, meeting with a Citigroup and Harvey Weinstein in the Hamptons. If Bernie did that, can you imagine?
Forget about it.
Her draconian conservative criminal justice record, which we have talked about many times, and it speaks for itself. So ask yourself why. Why wasn't she asked? If Bernie had done one of these things, he would have been like pummeled on it.
And they hit him on the the alleged sexual harassment on Bernie Sanders. Did they ask them? Did they ask Kamala Harris about Willie Davis? I bet not. I didn't see their town hall, but I bet that was left out of the cold too as well. You know, you could talk about him and an alleged sexual scandal, but you can't talk about a neoliberal because she's a woman. And you would be a misogynist.
She's a woman of color, and she'll also CNN and
Stop
her
being a
are like
misogynist,
best friends.
fam.
I know. I'm sorry. I also wanted to mention something that was going around. There's a Teen Vogue article criticizing Bernie Sanders, this apparent old burner who used to be for Bernie Sanders, but now can't be for Bernie Sanders because of his white male privilege, putting white men over people of color. And she talked about how he went over Stacey Abrams and didn't allow that. First of all, he does this every year. He did the State of the Union every single year.
And thank God he did it.
He went after Stacey Abrams.
Yes, on Facebook, not on national TV.
Not on national TV.
On Facebook.
And so I did want to point out, because one of my comrades pointed out that this woman works for CNN, and she's also very, very anti-Maduro.
Yep.
Very pro CNN, pro that kind of thing. And so a lot of people say, well, you're looking these people up, you're harassing them. And I just wanted to point out, nobody's harassing them. We are just exposing what's there. The information
Another
is there.
Anna Navarro over here.
We are exposing the stuff that's there. And you know what? just so you know, the Twitter article that I posted yesterday that we talked about, that we literally exposed on how every single CNN, most of the candidates were not random people. They were lobbyists or people that worked in Democratic campaigns or were previous candidates. All that entire thread is gone. So people are trying to put the screenshots of everything we have. And I have a lot of screenshots that I'll repost and stuff too. But the article thread, the link is gone. The woman disappeared from Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't know if she was pushed away or if she did it herself. But
she probably got away before the barrage came. And once again, we don't want to harass anybody. We went out there, but we are exposing you. You've been exposed, people. There you go. There's my beautiful white face with my rosacea. Fam, we got to get out of here. We got some breaking news real quick. We'll probably get into the story.
We'll probably
next
get into
week.
the story next
week.
week.
Give us the quick breaking news, and we got to get out of here. Johnny Tsunami's got to get to work.
Well, just breaking news. You know, I mentioned it earlier. India and Pakistan are pretty much on the brink of war, and it's something we need to be paying attention to. A lot of us don't really pay attention to what's going on international affairs, but with everything
we're consumed
that's
with
happening,
Cohen.
Yes, but with everything that's happening around the world, we need to be more mindful, because this could, with just Venezuela and like the alliances being made, all of this could turn into a more serious war.
So next week we're going to talk a little bit about India, Pakistan. We got to mention Cuba. Of course, we're going to talk about Venezuela sanctions, Haiti. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, and me and the fam are going to bring it to you. I just want to say, fam has been doing some amazing work with her Latino skills, and just did a radio show not too long ago. It was pretty awesome hearing her speak for the room. For I am Pasta Jardula,
and I'm Fiorella. Thanks for watching, guys.
Convo out. Hey, Joe Biden, this is what you get.
With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey.
It is a bunch of malarkey, fam. I love